Hey guys, it's Camus, and today we're going to discuss the game Bellin-Miles from the British Championship, 1982. As some of you probably know, I have a soft spot for the British players of the 80s. That was when I first became excited about chess during the English chess explosion. And anyway, this is a game that left an impression upon me. It's not a particularly flashy game, but it's a very nice positional win by Tony Miles. And it was an important game for him because it sealed his win of the tournament, which gave him the British Championship for the first time. So we have some audio that we'll hear briefly from him, and thanks to Mike Basman for permission to use it. It's recorded at the party following the tournament, and he's talking to Mike Basman. Unfortunately, I can't play you any more of it because the party gets really rowdy and the tape becomes increasingly harder to understand. So we'll just hear a little bit to get a flavor of the occasion. And I've actually transcribed a lot of his comments that we'll discuss during the game. Okay, so here we go. It was 1e4, 1c5, knight f3, d6, knight c3, knight c6. And let's hear from Tony right now.
At this point, I remember a certain line, which was played about 12 years ago in 3 games. The first game I couldn't remember. The second game I remember was Bellin beating Danny Wright in Islington, round 6, about 1902. That is correct. And the third one was one where Bellin-Miles put the line out of commission. However, I couldn't remember any of them very well. Was it Bellin-Miles against Bellin? I've no idea. Anyway, shut up, Mike. The game went d4. Pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, carry on, I just paused. G6, knight d5. This was the very line I had in mind. I have been trying to get this line for the last 10 years, but no mug has been fool enough to play it.
Okay, so this was the line he was talking about. In case you didn't understand that, he said he'd waited 10 years to spring this line because he had remembered that Bellin had defeated Danny Wright in Islington in 1972, and he was unaware whether Bellin knew that Bellin-Miles had actually put the line out of commission. So, but he said he didn't remember any of the games, so he was kind of playing it by ear. As it turns out, he did it a pretty darn good job. So the game he's referring to is Barrel Bellin-Miles, and I believe that was also 1972. Sorry, I don't have the date. But anyway, so this is the line. This line is actually still viable from what I understand. I don't play the Dragon, but people play it differently than they played back then. So even though Bellin-Miles put this particular line out of commission, apparently it has been revived with mixed results from what I can see. Anyway, at this point, he played bishop to g7, and now the point of the knight to d5 is knight to b5. Now, Miles said he expected bishop to e3 because that was the line Bellin-Miles gave. So I guess at this point he decided that Bellin hadn't seen the Bellin-Miles game, which I suppose wasn't too unusual back then, because back in those days there was no internet, and I guess if you didn't carefully go through every copy of Chess Informant, you could easily miss something important. And here, apparently, Bellin did. So, knight to b5 was played, okay, with an obvious threat on c7 here. Now, interestingly, Polagaevsky had annotated this position somewhere, I don't know where, and according to Miles, had given the move an exclam with the comment, "with advantage." And now Miles proceeds to show that that is not necessarily the case. But I should also mention that Rybka agrees with Polagaevsky and gives a half pawn plus to white. Okay, so rook to b8 to avoid the unfortunate forking of the rook and the king. And now Bellin plunges ahead, knight b to c7 check, king to f8, knight to b5. He has to do this because in the previous position, black is threatening e6, and one of the knights will have to fall. So he has to beat a retreat here. And now a6, knight b to c3, knight e6, knight to f4. Now Velimirovich and Miles both suggest knight to e3 in this position. However, Bellin played knight to f4. And now b5 was apparently Velimorovich's line in the aforementioned game, and this is threatening b4, which would knock the knight around the board a few more laps, according to Miles. So a3 was played to prevent this. Now bishop to b7, bishop to d3. Now, Miles had a choice of two plans here. The first being knight g to e7, followed by d5. And I looked at a bunch of other games in this line, and this seems to be the plan that everyone but Miles followed. But from what I can determine, Miles's plan that you'll see in a minute is actually the best one, and may still be a viable choice against this line. I don't know, because as I said, I'm not a dragon player. The variations I play against the Sicilian don't lead to the dragon generally, so I don't really know anything about it. I'm sure some of you guys probably do. But anyway, so this plan he rejected, and instead he decided to get his king out of the way another way, by artificially castling. So he plays knight to f6 here. He said he actually did want to play knight g to e7, but he wants to reserve that square for his king, because what he's going to do here, he's going to artificially castle, and the knight would prevent that from happening. So anyway, white castles, king to e7. This is all part of Miles's plan. Knight to h3. Okay, this has the idea of playing f4. Now here Miles commented that d5 was possible in this position, but given that white had wasted 9 tempi with his knight, he felt he was justified in maintaining the tension. So he didn't want to do anything just yet. So he completes his plan here. Plays rook to e8, and now f4, which was Bellin's intention, to expose the king on the e file. But now Miles just plays king to f8, and after queen to e1. Well, okay, so you might be wondering what would happen if white had continued with his plan of f5. And so before we go on, we'll look at that. f5, e takes f5, e takes f5, and now queen to b6. And Miles considered that he had ample central control. He said he's controlling most of the board here. And Rybka agrees, giving the advantage to black in this position. So perhaps Bellin was wise not to pursue this. So after king to f8, instead of f5, he played queen to e1. And now Miles just calmly plays king to g8. And in the tape, he said that after a rough calculation, he had calculated that white had wasted 9 tempi with his knight, and he had wasted 4 tempi with his king to get to a very normal looking position, and he considered this a pretty good deal. And the remainder of the game shows that he exploits his lead in development and manages to get a space advantage as well. So now this is the plan that I haven't seen duplicated by anybody. So if anybody plays this as black, you might want to consider his plan, because it could be a case of this is a game that people just didn't notice, and I checked this with the computer. There's absolutely nothing wrong with these moves, and I can't see any better moves for white in this position. So this may well still be a way to go, rather than the other plan of developing the knight to e7. Okay, so let's go on. After king to g8, Bellin played king to h1. And Miles said, showing an inability to find an active plan. However, Miles had no problem finding an active plan, and this would be a good point in the tape, video, for you to see if you can spot Miles's plan. I'll give you a minute, and then we'll switch back. Okay, so what he played was knight to g4. And what is the idea here? Well, it's not so much to do with the knight. The idea is to play f5, and he said that would be killing the bishop on c1. If Bellin was unable to clear that obstructing pawn on f4, and also with pressure down the long diagonal, and particularly against e4. This is what this is all about. So Bellin plays bishop to d2, and now Miles continues with f5. Naturally, Bellin plays e takes f5. He could have played queen to g3, but after knight to f6, followed by d5, black has a strong position. And he could have also played, after queen to g3, Miles could have also played d5 himself, and after e5, d4 is also very good for him. So queen g3 was not on the cards. Instead, after f5, he played e takes f5, e takes f5. And here on the tape, Basman observed that Bellin looked very worried and was behind on the clock. And Miles replied that Bellin, an inveterate smoker, had only smoked 3 or 4 cigarettes by this point, so he obviously did not know that his position was critical yet. Okay, so queen to g3 and d5, and the idea of this is the idea of d4 opening the diagonal and planning knight f6 to e4. Rook a to e1 was played, the logical move. Queen to d7, clearing the back rank. Now knight to g5. And here Miles decided to play knight to f6 with the idea of knight to e4, and really a pretty overwhelming position. So a very dangerous position for white. So Bellin decided to get some counterplay, queen to h3, and this has 2 ideas. He's attacking h7, so obviously that knight on f6 can't move right away, and also even if he does decide to land on e4, now there's a half pin on the f pawn against the queen. So after exchanges on e4, black would not be able to play f takes e4 at any point without losing his queen. So, but Miles had seen all of this, and instead he played d4. So this knocks the knight back yet again. It's 10 tempi with the knights. 11 at this point. And now rook b to d8, just centralizing his pieces. a4. Miles said that Bellin tried to get clever at this point, but he didn't think it was that clever. The idea here is that he's trying to get the a2 g8 diagonal for his bishop, so in the event of pawn takes pawn, then he would be getting some strong compensation after bishop to c4. So Miles decided that he had to get rid of the knight, so he played h6, and now a takes b5, a takes b5, and now white's knight comes back, queen to d5, centralizing the queen and setting up a battery against the king and dominating the long white diagonal here. Now, this was the critical position of the game, and you should consider what you would do for white here. White's not is not losing yet, but he will be shortly. and see what kind of plan you come up with for him. Okay, well, what he should have done, he should have played knight to h4. And with a position like this, he's obviously threatening the g-pawn. And, excuse me, knight to e4. Well, there's a couple of moves here. Say if black had played queen to f7, excuse me, to protect the g-pawn, then his b-pawn hangs. So that's no good. Instead, if you'd played king to h7, then queen to g3, still threatening that pawn, queen to f7, and again he's losing his b-pawn, and white has pressure and is back in the game. Okay, the third possibility after knight to h4 is knight to e4, which is black's best, with something like the following: bishop takes e4, f takes e4, f5, e3, and now bishop to e3, surprisingly, gives some play to white. For instance, if we take the bishop, knight takes e3, the queen is attacked, queen to e5, knight to g6. Black is still better, but white is very active now and is in a lot better shape. Even though he's down a piece, he definitely has some strong compensation. And I can't remember what Rybka's evaluation here was, but I believed it was close to equal. So anyway, it's all immaterial because Bellin didn't think of this plan, and instead he played the groveling after queen to d5. He should have played knight to h4 in this position. Instead, he played king to g1, showing that he had absolutely no idea what to do. So Miles plays knight to e4, and obviously black is just about winning now, and he's going to build up a decisive space advantage. White has very little in the way of moves, so he plays rook to e2, rook to e6, rook f to e1, rook to d8. And you can see, if you just try to look for moves for white, you find that it's not so easy. Bishop to c1. Now, so Miles declares here that white is just about running out of moves, so he decides to cut his moves down even further. Very patiently biding his time. He's not trying to break through yet. He's just going to tidy things up here. h5, and with the tidying maneuver, bishop to f6, king to g7, knight b8 to d7, which takes away the squares from white's queen. As you can see, after bishop to f6, white's queen is in really a bad place. So anyway, Bellin plays after h5, plays knight to f2, and now bishop to f6, as mentioned. At this stage, Bellin had 5 minutes left on the clock, and Miles had 20 minutes. Knight takes e4. He's desperately trying to make something happen because he really basically couldn't figure out what else to do. So f takes e4, and now knight to d2. And that's pinning the e-pawn. He can't take without losing big time on the on e6 there. So, but Miles decided just to plow on with e3, and now knight to f3, bishop to g7, defending the g. Well, excuse me, that's an incorrect move. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That is correct. He's defending the g7 pawn indirectly with the rook there. I forgot my own notes. f5, and this is played to prevent black from piling up on the f4 pawn by moving the rooks to the f file, followed by bishop to h6. So at this point, Miles plays the very good move, rook to f6. This is a pawn sacrifice, but as you will see, it works out very well. So f takes g6, obviously. And now rook e to f8, threatening rook takes f3. Now, here, white could have played he could have played knight to h4. And once again, this was his very last chance to get back into the game. If he had played knight to h4, Miles planned knight to e5, knight to e7, or bishop to c8, winning. Actually, the computer likes bishop to c8 with the following line: queen to g3, bishop to g4, b3, knight to e5, h3, knight takes d3, h takes g4, knight takes e1, rook takes e1, h takes g4, queen takes g4, rook to f4, queen to h3, queen to e4, g3, queen takes c2, queen to e6, king to h8, g takes f4. Also, you could have tried queen to h3, queen to h3, queen to f2, check, king to h1, queen takes e1, king h2, king to g8, and white can safely resign. Or instead of the previous line, instead of queen to h3, g takes f4, queen to f2 check, king to h1, queen to h4 check, king to g2, queen to f2, king to h3, and he's going to be mating soon. Let's see. So in the position of the game, as I said, in the game after rook e to f8, he played rook to f1, but had he played b3, then Miles, as I said, he was threatened to play rook takes f3 with something like the following: rook takes f3, g takes f3, rook takes f3, hitting the queen, queen to g2, knight b4, rook to d1, knight takes d3, rook takes d3, rook to f1 check. Very nice move, that. And he really has to play, he can't play queen takes e1 because queen to h1 mates, so he has to take with the king. And now queen to f5, king to g1, bishop takes g2, king takes g2, queen g4 check, king to h1. If he plays king to f1, queen to f3, king to g1, queen takes e2, bishop to a3, queen to f2 check, king to h1, queen to f1, and so he can't take that way. So instead he goes to h1, and then queen takes e2 is just winning easily. Okay, so let's go back to the game, and black has just played rook e to f8, threatening rook to f3. So Bellin played rook to f1, and now Miles found a very nice move here. I'll give you a chance to find it yourself. Okay, so he plays knight to e5. Okay, and the idea of this is if knight takes e5, then rook takes f1 is checkmate. Conversely, after knight to e5, if queen takes h5, then knight takes f3 check, g takes f3, queen takes h5, and sayonara queen. So anyway, after knight to e5, Bellin, grimly hanging on, played rook e to e1, and Miles just played knight takes f3, and white resigned. I guess they had both seen the continuation. G takes f3, rook takes f3, rook takes f3, rook takes f3, and now the queen is hit, queen to g2, and now I wonder if you can see Miles's finish. He didn't get to play it, but he had calculated it, and apparently Bellin had calculated it too, but it's the very nice move, rook to g3. Of course not. After queen to g2, rook to f1 doesn't work in this position because bishop takes f1 and white would still be winning. But instead, after queen to g2, rook to g3, queen takes g3, queen to h1 is checkmate. A very smooth and logical win from Miles. A very brave plan to allow his king to be displaced and taking all that time to get himself castled as in a normal game of chess, but that being balanced out by the loss of time from White's knights being kicked all over the board. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll have some more British chess players from time to time. Thank you, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.